Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. We are back for a new episode of the School of Emo, and we are going into a deep dive of another band that has been around for a while, but is also kind of a hallmark within the emo space. I feel like within like maybe a sub-genre of the culture. So curious to hear your thoughts and your experience with this band, if you are a big fan or have been exposed to the band in some way. But that is Coheed and Cambria. And what's so interesting is that this is one of the bands within this world that has built such an intricate storyline within rock music, emo music, music history as a whole, kind of blending music with comic books, which is something that we see a little bit with Gerard Way and My Chemical Romance, but not quite to the same level as Coheed and Cambria, where it seems like the entire band has followed along with these different storylines. And so it sets them apart to be really unique within the music space and have some pretty die-hard loyal fans that have been following since the beginning and deeply interwoven within these storylines. So to kind of understand where all of this comes from, set the stage, we're going to the mid 1990s in Nyack, New York. So before we had Coheed and Cambria, several members played together in a band called Shabooti. And that included Claudio Sanchez on vocals and guitar, Travis Stever on guitar, Josh Eppard on drums, and Michael Todd on bass. So Shabooti blended together punk with progressive rock and experimental influences. So they kind of got into that experimental space, which was starting to kind of just hit the scene in the 1990s, right? We saw such a huge expansion in the 1990s over like music as a whole and just creativity within genres, which really set the stage for third wave of emo and what that was going to look like. And so they were part of that with more of that experimental sound within this kind of punk rock space. So with Claudio Sanchez, he was already thinking a little bit bigger than what Shabooti was doing at the time. And he began writing a science fiction narrative inspired by family struggles, mythology, and progressive storytelling. And that would eventually become the Amory Wars. So in 2001, Shabooti dissolved and the band reformed under a new name, Coheed and Cambria, which was named after the two central characters in this sci-fi narrative that Claudio Sanchez wrote. That led us to this record, the first record that they released, called The Second Stage Turbine Blade. This introduced fans to the beginning of the Amory Wars saga, which was a galaxy expanding story about a couple caught in a political conspiracy and their children who will become key figures in the fate of the universe. So that was the background and the story that influenced this album. But the sound blended together emo, this very early 2000s emo, post-hardcore, which was coming out of the 90s, progressive rock, metal, and pop melodies. So blending together a little bit of all of it, which again, going into that third wave of emo, was kind of how it went. Everyone blended these different themes together in their own way. What was really unique with Coheed and Cambria was the lead singer, Claudio, his distinctive high-pitched voice, which immediately made the band recognizable and kind of helped set them apart from the other music that was growing at this time. Early fans were pretty divided. Some loved the ambition, some didn't know what to make of it, but they still saw success and it really set the stage for what's to follow. So, going into one of the songs on this first album, and remember, this isn't the first set of music, maybe not even the first album that these band members put together, but under Coheed and Cambria, this was the first. So, one of the biggest songs from that album is Devil in Jersey City. He Shabooty, New Jersey bound. When sound asleep, they'll find you at your most vulnerable position. Speak up, let out. When down the street, the corner boys fuck shit up. Scream loud, scream sayonara, oh, oh, oh. Sweet Josephine, will you follow me home? Scream loud, scream sayonara, oh, oh, oh. Sweet Josephine, will you fuck me back home? Let's fire it up. Ha ha, now. Let's fire it up. Ha ha, now. Sayonara. Don't let them scare you. When you're down on the floor bleeding, bastard, you'll be getting home real soon. And I'll pray for you high health. Don't let them scare you. When you're down on the floor bleeding, bastard, you'll be getting home real soon. Speak up, let out. Caught in the crossfire. Compared to the step to the bone that might break, it's too late to find a better way out of this. With the finest regards that I lost in the cracks of this street. So interesting, right? Probably not what I expected, kind of coming in not deeply familiar with the band's music. Like I knew a few songs, I knew the sound a little bit, I knew the band name, but I wasn't as familiar with the specific albums. And so kind of reading the storyline and then getting into this first album, it kind of threw me off a little bit, which is really interesting. Just hearing about a band and then seeing what they put out and experiencing it from that perspective instead. It worked though. Whether you like it or not, it worked. And in 2003, Coheed released the album that truly launched them into the alternative scene and gave them a place. And that was In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. So this album expanded both what they were doing musically, so the musical scope of the band, and the Amory Wars storyline. So songs range from pop-leaning sequels to massive progressive rock epics, very much placed in that perfect time of the early 2000s to be accepted within this kind of alternative, whether you call it emo, pop punk, whatever space you want to define it as. And one of the defining tracks was A Favor House Atlantic. So let's read through those lyrics. Your eyes tell the stories of a day you wish you could. Recall the moments that once have. Retract the footsteps that brought us to this favor. I wouldn't ask this of you. Good eyes, sniper. Here I'll shoot, you run. The words you scribbled on the walls with the loss of friends you didn't have. I'll call you when the time is right. Are you in or are you out? For them all to know the end of us all. Run, quick, they're behind us. Didn't think we'd ever make it. This close to safety in one piece. Now you want to kill me in the act of what could maybe save us from sleep and what we are. Good eyes, sniper. Now I shoot, you run. The words you scribbled on the walls with the loss of friends you didn't have. I'll call you when the time is right. Are you in or are you out? For them all to know the end of us all. Bye bye, beautiful. Don't bother to write. Disturbed by your words, and they're calling all cars. Face, step, let down. Face, step, step down. The words you scribbled on the walls with the loss of friends you didn't have. I'll call you when the time is right. Are you in or are you out? For them all to know. Bye bye, beautiful. Don't bother to write. Disturbed by your words, and they're calling all cars. Face, step, let down. Face, step, step down. So with this album, the crowd and the fans really got behind it with having, this song specifically, right? Playing on radio, like being available, something that people could connect to. The melodies were something that fans could connect to, but also having some other songs like the chant that was very loud through the crowd during their live shows early on, Man Your Own Jackhammer. Momentum was building and the band began to tour with bands like Thursday, Thrice, Taking Back Sunday. So even though they were a little bit more progressive and a bit of an outlier within the scene as a whole, they were being wrapped up within this scene that now we call emo, that third wave. And really connected to fans and built their fandom in that way. So in 2005, that gave fans what they considered to be the masterpiece from the band, Good Apollo, I'm Burning Star 4, Volume 1, From Fear Through the Eyes of Madness. Sounds like Star Wars, right? With so many words. The opening riff of Welcome Home became one of the most recognizable guitar lines in modern rock at the time. This also introduced songs like The Writer, which was a meta character representing Claudio himself within the storyline, the stories that he was writing. And this album was a bit darker, it was heavier, it was more theatrical, kind of pushing the band further into that progressive territory and kind of setting up the stage for some other albums that would follow suit, like Volume 2 in 2007, No World for Tomorrow. And it really cemented the fans alongside the comic series and the storylines that were being written. And while they were hitting commercial success and that commercial peak with these volumes and their evolution, the band did go through a pretty turbulent period, like many did in the kind of later early 2000s. They experienced drummer Jeff Eppard leaving the band due to substance issues, common within the scene at the time. Bassist Michael Todd leaving following some legal troubles. And they continued forward and eventually welcomed Josh Eppard back in 2011, finding new members where they had to, and then restoring part of the classic lineup with Eppard returning. During these changes, though, they still released more albums. So Year of the Black Rainbow in 2010, The Afterman Ascension in 2012, with The Afterman Dissension in 2013, and then The Color Before the Sun in 2015. So while all of this was happening, unlike most of the concept bands of the time, they didn't keep the story confined to music. So Claudio began to expand the Amory Wars into comic book series, into novels, graphic novels, deluxe album lore. They were published through collaborations with Boom Studios, later through Claudio's own imprint, Evil Ink Comics. And so while the albums were following some of the storylines and kind of an extension in some way, the stories themselves were also expanding and developing and growing and changing and continuing to be released. So that allowed fans, reading different stories while listening to the albums and being fully immersed in all of the stories that Coheed and Claudio were putting out for them. So that really helped with keeping the fandom connected to the band, even when there was a little bit of turbulence and some band changes and things that they were going through that were very common and normal for bands. But fans had kind of a different experience through that process than maybe with other bands that didn't have that connection with other stories and creative outlets. Members of Coheed also explored creative side projects during that time. So with Claudio, he got the Prize Fighter Inferno, which was a darker electronic and experimental project that expanded the Amory Wars narrative. Travis Stever did Davenport Cabinet, which was a melodic indie project showcasing his songwriting. Josh Eppard went on to do Weird Science, which was a hip hop project blending humor, storytelling, and personal reflection. So while they were still putting out music, there was also other creative outlets for some of the band members to put their energy into and also offer to fans, maybe some other layers to it all outside of the Coheed and Cambria brand or community. So going into the 2020s, they entered a new chapter. So in 2022, they released Vaxis Act 2. Late 2010s, they released Vaxis Act 1, but Act 2 was A Window of the Waking Mind, which continued the Amory Wars storyline. So the Vaxis arc is a 5-album narrative exploring a new generation of characters. The third act was released in 2025. So the idea is that the other 2 are to follow and will come soon. As of today and recording this, I did not see anything about the next one. It's not released yet, so who knows? But as of 2026, at the time of recording, the band continues to headline international tours, release expanded lore through their comics and novels, and then maintain one of the most dedicated fan communities in alternative music. They also have their own fan group called Children of the Fence, and they have their own, they're part of the cruise, I think the Never Ender cruise, correct? So they're expanded into the community and deeply involved within their community while also continuing their creative outlets in other places. So I did look through because I was curious about like the fandom, and especially with these storylines kind of interwoven within the stories written outside of the music itself and being expanded in their own way. What people thought in terms of the timeline of how the albums may connect to the other stories in the comics. And so fans do have their own ideas about how the albums and storylines should be enjoyed in the chronology of these that should be not just based on release. So with looking through Reddit threads and coming up with the list or finding the list that's somewhat agreed upon more than most, this is what I found. And if you're deeply involved in this, what would you debate? Because this is not what everyone agrees on. There are some other opinions for sure, but this seems to be something that's mostly agreed on. The Afterman Ascension, the Afterman Descension, Year of the Black Rainbow, the second stage Turbine Blade, which was our first album, and Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, Good Apollo on Burning Star 4, Volume 1, Fear Through the Eyes of Madness, My Brother's Blood Machine, Good Apollo on Burning Star 4, Volume 2, No World for Tomorrow, and then the Vaxis Acts. So Act 1, The Unheavenly Creatures, Act 2, A Window of the Waking Mind, and Act 3, The Father of Make Believe. So still heavily debated based on the comic storylines and how the different albums may represent different character journeys and perspectives. Very much left up to the interpretation of the fans. But it's kind of interesting to think of it that way. So if you are exploring all of this from day one, if you're a comic book novel type person, maybe you dive into those first, or vice versa, music first followed by those if that's something you're interested in. And maybe that is the order you listen to the albums in, especially if you're not as familiar with the band like I am not, beyond like some hits and some music that they've put out, but I'm not as familiar with like albums and the concepts as a whole. And so maybe starting with that list can be helpful to open your mind and experience the band in a way that fans think maybe it should be experienced based on the storylines. And keep an eye out, because if the Vaxis series is supposed to be 5 acts, then we still have 2 acts to go. So there's a lot that could come out and be released soon. So when we think about Coheed and Cambria, they're proof that the emo and post-hardcore world could grow far beyond its roots into more progressive rock, into science fiction, immersive storytelling. They truly did build a universe, and they survived different changes with lineups and industry and all of that, while still sticking true to the stories that they were dreaming up and wanting to be part of, and have continued to do that for more than 20 years now, which is incredible, and they're still with it. So thank you for listening. If you're a big fan of Coheed and Cambria, please share your experiences, thoughts, favorite songs, your favorite fan moments and experiences, tours, whatever it may be. I would love to hear them. Our community would love to hear them and talk about them, and just experience that from your memories and your experiences. YouTube is the best place for that, as there's comments and it's possible to connect with one another on this episode, or you can leave a review and put your thoughts in there too, and that can be seen. But I would love for you to share. And as always, we are kind of getting into some of the more obscure to me bands, right? The bands that I'm not as deeply connected to in my own listening experience. And so if there's a band that you really want to talk about, a band from history, a band that is now coming up that you're really excited about, I would love to have you on the podcast. I would love for you to share and me to get to learn with you and from you, and just have that conversation with you. So you can check out the show notes and find my email. Just email me. I would love to get that set up and have you on for one of our classes. Until then, we're going to keep going into some bands, keep our eyes open for some new albums. Some of our favorite, most loved bands continue to put albums out. So we'll keep an eye out on that. So from this class, your homework is to maybe go check out, read up. I encourage you to go through some Reddit threads and just read up on how the storylines of the Amory Wars are interwoven within the different Coheed and Cambria albums. Just kind of get a feel for how deep that is. And if it excites you, go listen to those albums. And then I will see you in our next class.